Hello, my name is Sip Mendes and welcome to Sip's Wood Chips. In my previous video I made this economy bowl out of walnut and white oak. And I had a little bit of trouble with the dovetail joints, if you recall. And I've been trying to figure out exactly why they didn't fit together better. And I have here some of the leftover joints. And although they look like they fit quite well, they're actually a little bit loose. And so that was puzzling me as why they wouldn't come together tight enough. When I kept trying to size them, they would not slide through. And eventually when they did slide through, they were much too loose. So let's do some close-up work and we'll see what went wrong. Remember, before you try to do any woodworking project, make sure you read, understand, and follow all the instructions that come with your power tools and equipment. Woodworking is fun, but it's important to work safely. So here's the parts of a dovetail router bit. It has a 1/4 inch shank. It cuts a 1/4 inch in diameter, so that's the width of the bit. It's only usable for the top 5/16 of an inch. And the angle from here to here is 7.5 degrees. What I was not aware of was this little curve here. If you cut more than 5/16 of an inch deep, it will start cutting this little curve part. And I think that is what messed up my joint. In cutting a dovetail joint, there are some things you really need to be careful with. First of all, you should make sure that the two pieces of wood are properly jointed. That means that they should join in a good straight line. When stacked together, they should be of exactly the same thickness. These are about 3/4 of an inch. It helps greatly if you mark which side goes together, and you can do that by just putting a couple of lines across one side of it, right across the seam. That way, if one of them is backward, it won't match because you won't have your marks. If you have it the other way, again, it may not mark. The marks won't line up. Only when both pieces are put together properly will the marks line up. So it's important to make sure that they're properly joined, they're of exactly the same thickness, and then mark which sides match up. Here's my dovetail bit in my router table. And I think the problem was the height of the bit. This little block of wood is 5/16 of an inch high. If I put my router bit in there, you can see that the tip of the router bit is actually sticking up higher than that. In order to use this router bit, it has to be less than 5/16 of an inch high. This one is almost 3/8 of an inch high, about 10 millimeters. Here's some scrap that was left from the bowl I made. And you can see that you can fit these together quite easily. And the problem I was having was that I kept making the groove wider and wider until the joint slipped easily. But when it did, it also was way too loose. I glued this together and I thought that that would be fine, but apparently it wasn't. I've lowered my router bit to about 1/4 of an inch, and I can check to make sure that it's not too high now by just using my little measuring block. It completely hides the bit. So here's the two pieces of wood that I'm going to use. They're 3/4 of an inch thick. They've been joined, and there's my lines to mark how they fit together. So on the first piece, I'm going to mark the approximate center. And then I'm going to set my my fence so that the bit is in the center of that piece. And I don't need to be exactly in the center. I mostly need to be pretty close to the center. A bit in the center. Okay. So I'm going to go past it twice. First in one direction, then reverse the piece and run it through a second time. I'm always going to feed from right to left. I ran it through an extra time because it didn't feel like it had done very well on the first pass. Okay, so there's my groove. Now, I don't want this part to be very, very thin on the other piece of wood, so I'm going to widen this just slightly. I'm going to widen it about maybe a 1/16 of an inch. And I'm going to widen it by exposing more of my bit. I'm going to move my fence in. And again, I'll run it through twice. And that widened my groove slightly. Okay. Okay. For the next one, I need to just make a skim cut. So on making these skim cuts, it's very likely to splinter, and those splinter pieces to get caught around the bit. So I'm just going to make a skim cut that just barely starts cutting the wood. I just barely started skimming the edges and cut nice crisp lines on each side. Now I'm going to expose a little bit more of the bit and make a deeper cut. And I have a long way to go, so I don't really need to measure. So I'll just keep making passes until I get close to the size I need. Still got a long way to go. I'm starting to get very close to the size it needs to be. Matter of fact, it's just right. So I've made several passes at this point, and it is a very snug fit. Now I can't physically push it all the way through, but at this point I really don't want to, because the I won't be able to get it apart again. And the wood is probably hot from the cutting, and I can sand the sharp edges slightly, but only ever so slightly. I'm going to sand only the sharp edges ever so slightly. They tend to bind in the groove. And these inside corners I can also sand just slightly to keep them from binding. I don't want to sand them very much at all. I don't want anything to loosen up the joint. Again, make sure I have marks on the same side. And a tight, snug fit like that is just perfect with the glue and all. Also, after I cut my rings, most of the rings are only going to be about less than an inch, except the center one, and so I think it'll work better if they're tight. Maybe I'm hopefully I'm making an error in the right direction, but I think I'd rather have it a little bit tight than the least bit loose. So I think that's as tight as I'm going to make it. And that's about as tight as your joint should be. Looks like the more I work with it, the smoother it fits. But if it doesn't fit the full length, like if you have an 11-inch board and you can't slide it 11 inches, I think that's okay. Because after you cut your pieces, it's not going to slide as far. You can sand it to fit smoother, but I wouldn't do it ahead of time. If you get a loose joint, when you make the joint, it's going to be even looser when you cut your rings. Thank you for watching. If you've enjoyed this video, click on like. If you're not a subscriber, click on subscribe. If you're not a member of YouTube, sign up for an account. It's quick and easy. You can leave comments, ask questions, and get answers. Until next time, goodbye.